Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Asian Hustle Network podcast. Today, we have a very special guest with us. His name is Rich Ting. Actor Rich Ting was born in Los Angeles, California, and is a fourth-generation Asian American. Growing up as an athlete, Ting played collegiate football at Yale University while earning a B.A., and then went on to achieve a dual J.D. and M.B.A. degree. Soon after achieving his scholastic goals, he realized that he needed to switch careers and pursue his passion for the entertainment industry, and specifically as an actor. Ting is most well known for playing the iconic character Bolo in the HBO Max drama series Warrior, a television series inspired by the writings and work of Bruce Lee, and is unforgettable on Amazon Season 4 of the critically acclaimed The Man in the High Castle as Captain Ichima, a driven, ambitious young detective in the Japanese Kempeitai. Ting currently lives in Los Angeles, California with his wife and teacup Maltese, Somi. In addition to working in film and television, he's still active in the martial arts world, loves to travel to exotic places, and is a true foodie at heart. Rich, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
We're very excited to have you today. So we'd love to know, what was your upbringing like, Rich, and what was your family dynamic like? What was it like growing up in LA?
Yes, I was born and raised in Los Angeles in the South Bay. I was born in Torrance, as well as where my mom was born and my grandparents. And the Japanese side of my family has been there for generations. And it wasn't until later that I moved to the Bay Area to finish junior high school and high school in San Francisco. My upbringing was very atypical as far as what I've heard. Obviously, when you're growing up, you don't know you're different, or you don't know you're doing things not the usual way, so to speak. It wasn't until I grew up older and I had more Asian American friends that were kind of, I would say, confused on what I did and what I didn't do growing up as a kid. My parents, for one, they were third generation Asian American. So their priorities in life were a lot different to the times that we were growing up as kids. And by we, I'm including my brothers and myself. I have two younger brothers. And it was a household where sports and athletics was definitely emphasized over the academics. Not to say that it was more important than schoolwork, but we were already raised to assume that we would get good grades. So that was almost like a given. Like you're going to do that. So let's focus now on the extracurriculars like football, basketball, baseball, track, martial arts. And as far as I can remember, people always ask me this question, especially like even my wife, when we first met. I was telling her like how my childhood was. Like I never remember having any free time. Literally, it was go to school, lunchtime I'm doing homework because I'm not going to have time to do homework at night because of practices. 2:30, 3 o'clock, school ends. I'm participating, for example, in the fall with flag football at my school. And then that's an hour of practice. And then I would jump in the car and my mom would take me to another location to do an hour of Taekwondo practice. And then I would jump back in the car. And this is a typical Monday, to be honest. And then by 5:30-ish, we would end up at Pop Warner practice at another field, which was full contact football. I started that at the age of 8 years old, while eating dinner and snacks in the car, changing multiple times from flag football uniform to Taekwondo outfit to Pop Warner football, full helmet, shoulder pads, thigh pads, everything. And then I wouldn't get home till about 8 o'clock, and my parents would give me kind of a time limit to do homework and to finish it because I would have to get rest so I could do it again the next day, and so we didn't speak any different languages in the house. I grew up speaking English, but my parents only spoke English. We took off our shoes. We had a rice cooker. I mean, that was probably the extent of my Asian culture in the house. I'm blessed now that I look back because I think that kind of lifestyle really kept me out of trouble and really kept me kind of in my lane and focused on the goal, which back then was to play collegiate football at a very good institution.
Yeah, wow, that is really interesting. I think it's a very unique experience because for a lot of Asian parents, they put so much emphasis on you have to study, you have to work hard, you have to do your homework. And then I think that intimidates a lot of children, especially when you're growing up, you're young, you feel like you need to put all your emphasis and your focus and time into school and your homework, right? But they really focused on sports and curricular activities at that age. Now looking back, obviously, you mentioned that you feel blessed, but at that age, did you feel like it was something that you were dreading? Like, oh, I wish I had more time to play? Or was it something that you knew was good for you because it taught you discipline?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's a little bit of both, to be honest. I remember, and my mom never lets me forget, let me put it that way, how I wanted to quit Pop Warner football. If you can imagine being 8 years old, 85 pounds, with the same size helmet that I wore at Yale in college, I wore when I was 8 years old. I guess I had a huge head when I was a kid, but the padding and the weight of all the equipment on an 8-year-old body, and then they're telling you to run in August up and down the field in 100-degree heat. It's not the most enjoyable experience, you know. But my mom definitely made it a point to tell me, like, you're not quitting, you're gonna man up and you're gonna do this, because she knew how much I loved it. She just knew maybe I didn't like the process of it, right? But come game day, when you're 8, 9, 10 years old playing at the high school field under the lights on a Saturday night, it's pretty cool, you know. And my mom knew that, so she kept me literally again in my lane about that. Similar to Taekwondo, there came a point, I think, in middle school where I had been doing it so much, and I think I was one belt away from getting my first degree black belt. And I kind of plateaued, I think, internally, if that even makes sense. If you can plateau as an 11-year-old, you know, that sounds so weak now, but I did. There was a lot of stuff going on in my life at the time, I guess. And my mom's like, she gave me an ultimatum. She gave me a deal. She was like, you get your black belt and then you can tell me if you want to quit. And I'll never forget that, because I got my black belt and I fell in love with it again. And it just propelled me to the future. So in hindsight, what I always say is, my parents, I think, raised us because of their generational advancement, let's say, because they weren't the immigrant generation. They just had this different perspective, and they saw sports as the vehicle to get us to that next level. You're correct in what you just said about traditionally, a lot of Asian parents don't look at athletics or sports to help their kids. If anything, look at it as a negative distraction, right? But I think that's just a product of their generation. A lot of people told me you have to go to Chinese school, you have to, you know, learn a language, you have to play an instrument, because those things are going to get you into college, or at least help. And it wasn't until, I mean, it happened in my family with my grandparents. You know, I had immigrant Chinese grandparents who were always telling us, stop playing sports, you need to go to Chinese school, you need to go to SAT class, you got to do all these things, which we were doing all of them except going to language school, but we were doing fine in the classroom. But it wasn't until they realized, literally, when I got accepted to Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Columbia, Dartmouth, Brown, UPenn, all the Ivy Leagues accepted me, they were like, oh my God, like, what, how? And then I told them, it's like, granted, I have the numbers and the grades, but you got to have something else, whether that's playing a musical instrument, or you got into Juilliard as an 8th grader, right? Or you're, you have this background that no one else has, or you can play a sport. These are all vehicles that help you get admitted to Ivy League schools, if not other, you know, prestigious institutions across the country. So when my own grandparents and our own family saw that and we're like, oh my gosh, that's crazy, their eyes opened up. So I think that's why I said I'm blessed now, because I look back and I really give all the credit to my parents, because of, obviously they're the ones steering the ship, right? And so, like I said, there were times when I felt like quitting. There were times when I felt like other friends, they do sleepovers and they hang out and they go to the movies, and I just never had time. It wasn't that my parents didn't let me, I never had the time. And so looking back, I have mixed emotions about that, but I'm blessed today to be doing what I'm doing, to have done what I have done in college and in grad school and in life, that I have no regrets about that.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And I think you bring up a really great point, because for me, for example, my parents, you know, they put me into Chinese school and they thought that it was a component that would help me excel better in school. It would really be, you know, good on my resume. I don't know, you know, but I think that they don't think about sports in that same way. They think it's a
Yes.
distraction, like you mentioned. And your parents being third generation, I think that plays a big role into, you know, how they raised you and what they thought would be really beneficial for you. Because a lot of immigrants, like, or people who, you know, a lot of our parents are immigrants, and I think the way that they think is very traditional. So they don't really think outside of the status quo. They don't really go against the status quo. They think like, oh, because I've been taught this way, it has to be like this, right? Because they want to follow tradition. But in America, all they teach us is be innovative, challenge the status quo, go against the grain and do what you want. And I think that plays a lot into how your parents raise you too. Like you have to do something that really makes you stand out, whether that be, some sort of extracurricular activity, music or sports, etc. And I think that it really goes to show like how they raised you when you were a child to like, put you into these sports. And as a child, it's hard for us to know like, oh, what is the outcome going to be if I continue to play the sport, right? As a child, you just want to, it's very easy for us to say, I want to quit because we don't like doing it. But for us to go through the process and actually be able to achieve something, maybe it's not a medal, but you're able to learn something or gain something out of it, then it all makes sense. Like, oh, that's why my mom or my dad, forced me or, convinced me to stay and continue to do this sport or continue to play this instrument. But yeah, I think that's a really interesting experience that I haven't really heard about. So thank you so much for sharing that.
No, I think no problem. I mean, I thank you for asking because nowadays we're more relevant. And I say we as an Asian American in the athletic world, back then before social media, before all this stuff could be easily accessed, right? No one really knew or saw Asians like myself or you participating in that sports and excelling in that field. So that was obviously a little weird, but it all goes back to my parents. I told them at a very young age, my dream is to play collegiate football at the Division I level. And what they promised me is that they were going to help me fulfill that dream. So whether that was telling me not to quit or to man up or to go to sleep earlier because we got to wake up, or we're not going to have a summer this year because we're going to different camps to get recruited. All these sacrifices, it actually led up to me being able to play at that next level. So again, I just want to, give praise and thanks to my folks, because obviously, that's what's ironic, right? You ask an 8-year-old, like, what do you want to do? And they're like, I want to be, play football at the collegiate level. And then the next question is, okay, go to sleep so you can go to practice. And you're like, I don't want to go to sleep. Right. So it's funny because I mean, how is anyone that young supposed to really know? We can all have dreams, but how do we know how to achieve those? Right. You kind of have to have faith in your parentals and into your seniors to guide you because of just their life experiences ahead of you.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So you graduated from Archbishop Riordan High School in San Francisco and then majored in history and humanities, minored in Asian American studies at Yale. And then I did read that you pursued a law firm job in downtown LA for a bit after earning your dual JD and MBA degree. What was that experience like? And what specifically made you want to switch careers and go into acting? Because that is really different.
Right. So the first dream was always to play football at the collegiate level, the Division I level. So I checked that box. But ever since I was 4 years old, and I say 4 years old because that's when I started Taekwondo, my martial arts study. And the reason I started at that age was because that's when I saw Bruce Lee on my television at home. And I saw him not only as a Chinese man on the screen, but someone who was powerful and strong because of his martial arts background. But he was also acting. So there was so many emotions and connections I got with Bruce back in the day that, when you're 4 years old, I mean, how can you possibly know how can your brain is still developing, you know what I mean? Maybe not medically, maybe I'm off and there's some doctors out there that are going to tell me I'm wrong about that, but you know what I mean? I saw something that was intriguing because he was on camera. And I think that's when the bug started. And then I became a huge Michael Jackson fan because by later in life, we had moved to Encino, and that's where the Jackson family was living. And I actually ended up going to a private school back in the day with Tito Jackson's kids. And so I just felt like they were so close and like I knew them, and we hung out after school before I started doing all these football things back in the day, right? Where I had free time. And so the combination of seeing someone like Bruce Lee, of being around, I think at the peak of Michael Jackson and the Jackson family, all that was just so Hollywood to me. And it just made me so intrigued about filmmaking and being on camera and production that it was always in the back of my head. So as I previously told you, I just never had free time to do anything but athletics, because whether it was football season, basketball season, or baseball and track season, there was always a season. So there was never a free period where I could be like, hey, I want to take some acting classes, or I want to participate in this school play, for example. There was never time for that. So it wasn't until I graduated Yale and I did my dual JD M.B.A program in grad school, which is kind of ironic to say, that I had the most time I've ever had in my life, because I would have class for, a couple hours in the morning. And then the M.B.A program was always catered to working people, whether they're executives or business people already. So the classes would be after 7 p.m. So I had this huge gap all of a sudden of 4 to 6 hours sometimes, depending on my class schedule at the law school, which was the daytime. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to do homework for 4 hours right now. I'm going to go do other things. I'm going to work out. I'm going to maybe start doing yoga. I'm going to start taking acting classes and really dive into the craft. And so that's how it kind of started, but it started as a hobby, just because I was embracing all this free time finally. And that's when people started to point like, hey, you should model. Hey, you should do commercials. Hey, you should do, and I was like, okay. And those kind of gigs were very convenient to my schedule, because I would only be required to show up for like a photo shoot or like a commercial shoot for like a few hours. It wasn't like going to be a Monday through Friday schedule, like 4 a.m. call time, night shoots, and all. There wasn't even close to that. So that kind of massaged the way I got into the business from that perspective. But then it wasn't until I finished law school and my business school that I went back to LA to take a job in downtown. My cousin and my blood cousin and my uncles are stunt coordinators in Hollywood. They've always been. It's an industry where those of us that don't know about it, where you're kind of grandfathered in. It's a very tight-knit fraternity, just due to trust, safety, and lineage. Like, you grow up seeing your dad do these crazy stunts, and then you take over, and it's really about family and trust because of the safety that's involved to do these crazy stunts in the business. So obviously my family knew of my athleticism. They knew of my martial arts background. They obviously knew how I looked and like what I literally could bring to the camera. And that's when my cousin asked me if I would be interested in doing stunts, in which I said, not really, because I just survived, 13, 14 years of full contact football, injuries here and there, but I don't think I'm ready to take on a car, or light myself on fire or fall from like a 10-story building. Even if you're falling to a mat, it's still like, I don't know about that life. Right. So long story short, I also told him I'm supposed to take a job at a law firm, and I've worked my whole life to get here. And now you're asking me. And he didn't pressure me, and he does. And I never blame him for this. If anything, I thank him for it. He asked me, he said, okay, well, there's also this opportunity. And I just kept it simple. I said, look, I've always had dreams of pursuing the entertainment world. I've been taking acting classes, up until now. Craft-wise, I'm still studying, as we all are that are still in the business. It's a never-ending process of learning, which I love. But I was like, I don't know if I can make that leap. So let me talk to the law firm guys. Let me talk to the partners. So I went and talked to the partners, and they said, look, do that. That sounds amazing. If it fails, you can come back. And that's honestly all the assurance I needed, because I didn't want to burn a bridge with these attorneys and these partners that I had worked so hard the summers before to lock in this position, right? At the same time, I didn't want to bypass an opportunity to fulfill my second dream. And so I made a promise to myself and to my cousin. And I said, I'll do stunts. I'll start just so I can get thrown into the fire, literally, where I'm on a set. I'm seeing how a crew works, how a director directs, how producers work, how stunt and actors coexist to make this amazing product. And I'm just going to take mental notes and absorb as much as I can, so that when I do transition to acting, I've already been in the game in some aspect, so to speak. And that's exactly what I did. I mean, next thing I knew, I was on Warner Brothers lot under the Back to the Future clock. You know what I mean? There's like tour buses going through our rehearsals, and I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing here? Right. And it was the most humbling, and also I think the best way to get introduced to this business, because I went in through the stunt world, and the stunt world, people do not understand or know because they just don't have access to this information. They are the first people on the set, the last people on the set. They're always building, tearing down, rebuilding, fighting. They're doing so many things and they're getting so dirty literally every day just to ensure the safety and protection of not only the cast, but the entire crew and production. And so when you enter through that angle and that department, there's nothing really glamorous about that. You're a worker. You're like almost like a construction worker on a set. And then the actors come in all ready to go and they're there for, 30 minutes to get their shot, and then they leave and everyone caters to them. Meanwhile, the stunt guys have been there since 4 a.m. and now it's like 3 p.m. and we're not wrapping anytime soon. So that really has that humbleness, that hardworking mentality, that awareness of how to be safe and to protect others has really stayed with me. And I'm so thankful for it because I think it's the best foundation to have, especially when you go to the other side of the acting, because now you're working with other actors. You're not working with stunt guys all the time, and so to have that kind of that knowledge and experience now, it's everything to me.
Yeah, that's insane. And yeah, it's a thankless job.
Yes,
It's the actor who's getting all the praise and your face
exactly.
is never shown, but you're doing all the hard, strenuous work, physical work, right? And it really is a thankless job. And, I hope that you were getting paid money, good money for that
Oh
while
no,
you were there.
I mean, that's another thing that helped that transition from the law firm to stunts. The money was never going to be an issue because it was a good amount for what
Yeah,
we do and what I did. But at the same time, I always knew it wasn't supposed to be about the money. It was supposed
right,
to be
right, right,
about
right.
something that I can do forever, and that's why I love acting. It's because when I'm 95 years old, hopefully I'm playing a 95-year-old on something, because that's the beauty of this game. My dad, he's an orthopedic surgeon. He's older, but he has no intent on retiring because he loves his job. And I think that was contagious to me growing up because I always thought about something like, we never talked about retirement in our house. I always heard other families like, oh, so-and-so's parents are retired. And I was like, what does that mean? And then my dad's like, it means they're done working and now they can enjoy their life. But what I do is my enjoyment. And so if I retire, it's almost killing my entire vibe and my whole like why I wake up every day. And I use that language because I always wanted to find something that I would want to wake up for. And so knowing that I would eventually go into acting, I was like, the money will come. Like, it's not about that. Of course, it made that initial transition from law to entertainment a little easier because I wasn't gonna, sacrifice one for the other. But then I was sacrificing my body and my livelihood, let's say, right? Potentially. So, like I said, just really blessed to have been introduced in that capacity because to this day, I think I have a tendency to get a lot of the production assistants in trouble on set. And what I mean by that is, as a stunt person, you get your own water, you get your own coffee, no one cares about what you're doing except your boss, the stunt coordinator. So now when production assistant people would ask me like, can I get you something? And I'm like, no, I'm fine. And then I go get it. Their boss is like, why is Rich going there by himself? Right. And I'm like, no, I don't need that catering. It's fine. And so I've learned to adjust to the new culture of being an actor. So that's always the joke. Like stunt guys always be like, dude, relax. And I'm like, no, I got it, So, but again, I'm just very, coming from that law school background and coming from the stunt background and finally, ending up as an actor as my final destination, I just bring these different contexts and these different perspectives to the job. And it really gives me no excuse but to enjoy and to do the best I can because I came from a totally different industry. And then I came from a totally different part of the industry in the stunt world. So that's why, work to me is vacation. It's when I'm not working that I'm dreading it. And that's the adversity when I'm not working.
Yeah, I love that your father had taught you that though, that mentality. And, you know, you are supposed to be doing something that you enjoy every day, right? Some people who talk about retirement, they can't wait for retirement. They can't wait until they're at the age of 65. That just goes to show that you didn't enjoy your time. You know, all
Yes.
that time from when you were working since you were 18 years old, all the way to 65, you didn't enjoy any part of that. And for you to be just so eager for retirement age to come, it's not a good feeling, you know. And
No,
I
it's
love that
sad, you
he's
know.
I love that he taught you to, you know, make sure that you are passionate about what you do and that you can wake up each morning feeling blessed that you're able to do this, that you have the opportunity to do this, right? And going back to you asking your law firm that you were working at, like, should I do this? Should I pursue this? And for them to say like, yeah, go ahead. This is like a great opportunity. Can you imagine what difference it would be if they were like, no, don't do it. You have to stay with us. That
Yeah.
would, I feel like, you know, if I were in your shoes, it would make me feel, oh gosh, like what if I burn this bridge? I have to stay here then, right? And I felt
Exactly.
like because they gave you that green light, it was a blessing in disguise, because it kind of opened up the doors for you to figure out if you even like this or not. And
Oh,
you know, lo
totally.
and behold, you did, and it all worked out in the end.
Yeah, I always say, you know, I've never been around another field. You know, my dad's, like I said, he's in the medicine world. And I always hear him encouraging, you know, people coming up out of med school, like, pursue this, pursue that. It's great because he loves what he does. But, and again, this is just my perspective, but when I got trapped into doing what we're doing, I have
Oh,
a
sorry,
family now.
it just froze for a little bit. So
Okay, no problem.
I'm gonna go back for a little bit. It might be my connection, but
Oh,
I
okay.
don't know why my internet is like, if my internet is fine, but then there's like 10 seconds where it like just stops, but I think it should be
Okay,
fine
no
now.
problem.
You can hear me fine, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. I'm gonna do a little clap. So sorry
Okay.
about that. Okay. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay, go ahead.
Two things come to mind when you bring that up because one, I always talk about how amazing that meeting was and that conversation with my former attorneys and partners were, because as you mentioned, I was insecure about it because I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want to burn this bridge. I worked so hard to get here. But at the same time, I've never heard more people in one industry, aka the law industry, tell me, if you don't have to do this, don't do this, because we're all doing this, and when we retire, then I'm going to do what I wanted to do, right? So a lot of them are very encouraging to just be like, do it now. I know it's hard to make that decision in life because you're so young and you don't have the maturity to know what's to come, but take it from us that we'll be here, go do it. And the second thing I always say, it's amazing what confidence can do, because knowing that they had my back, and I even had other attorneys that were at other law firms that were trying to recruit me for them, and I told them the same thing, and they said, oh my gosh, please go blow up and do that and represent for us, right? And those being the Asian American attorneys. And they said, if it all fails, you can come back. And I just felt so bulletproof after that. You know, I was like, I'm doing this, and my plan B is a great plan B, but I'm not, I never want to exercise that plan B if I don't have to. And so that's why I always say it, like when you're that young and you have that much confidence and you have that much support from strangers, like you're limitless, like you're immortal. And I give credit to all that, to all those people that had my back then, because I look back on my 20s now and I'm like, oh my God, I cannot believe I went there to film, or I did that project, or, you know, like, what was I thinking? But it all started adding up and making sense. And look what we're doing now. You know, I'm talking to you about my so-called career, even though I feel like I'm just starting out, to
Oh
be
my
honest.
goodness. No, not at all. You are amazing. Um, so I would love to know, you know, how did you end up transitioning out of stunt? And then
Mhm.
what was the entertainment world like when you were first starting out? Because I mean, in the Asian community, we talk about this all the time, but Asian representation, we don't see a lot of it, especially back then. Like there
Mhm.
was not a lot of Asian faces on screen. And for Asians, it was hard for us to look at role models or like think of role models because we didn't see them that often, right? Especially as a child, it was just hard for us to imagine like, oh, that's maybe something that I can do because
Mhm.
I actually see them on screen, but at that time it wasn't the case. So want to know, like, how did you transition, and then what was it like for you starting out as an Asian American actor?
Yeah, both those go hand in hand. I mean, number one, it makes me feel old because I got to start off by saying, well, back when I was that age, we didn't see it, but it was such a different time back in 2007-ish, late 2000s. And I remember being very open to my stunt brothers, let's say back then, and saying, I really want to pursue acting. They knew I was doing so many different things. They knew I was modeling. They knew I was doing commercial work. They also knew I was, acting and trying to pick up any roles and stuff I could on the side. But it wasn't until I think the last stunt job I did was the Green Hornet when Seth Rogen did it with Jay Chow. And I knew that was going to be my last project on the stunt side because I had accepted a job on a feature film in Southeast Asia and Vietnam that prior to coming on to that show in LA. And the promise I made to myself before this was I had this mentality. No one ever told me this. No one ever taught me this. It was just something that I came up impulsively from my gut. And I've throughout my life, and we're not going to go into all these different scenarios, but I trust my instinct and I trust my gut. It's gotten me out of a lot of weird situations, and I just have a lot of self-trust, in other words. And I remember like it was yesterday, to be honest. I was on the freeway in LA and I just knew. I was like, no, producer studios, if they're going to cast an Asian character in that time period, they're not going to look in LA. They may say they're going to look and cast out of LA in the US, but they're going to go to Asia. They're going to go to Hong Kong. They're going to go to Thailand. They're going to go to mainland China. This is when South Korea wasn't on the map yet as an entertainment mogul yet. But I was like, because it's happened. Like I happened to be working on the Green Hornet, which with Jay Chow, right? And then even before that, I worked on G.I. Joe with Lee Byung-hun, who was huge and so big in Korea that they were kind of forced to be like, oh my gosh, we should use the South Korean actor, right? And that's what I always knew. The roles for us Asian men prior to that in the US were like the recurring or the guest stars, or if you were a series regular, like B.D. Wong is an icon because he was on that show forever as the forensics guy. And that's all we knew, right? And then if there was another show, the Asian guy's always like the medic or like the forensics guy again. And you're like, okay, so that's it. So we're all going out for this one role. So I made a promise to me. I said, look, even though I'm fourth generation, my grandparents were born in LA, Hollywood is not going to look at me or consider me because I don't come with a following or a country behind me, literally. So I said, I'm going to have to go to Asia. I've never been to Asia. I'm going to have to go to Asia, make some noise, blow up so that a producer in LA goes, oh my gosh, who's this guy? And then they're going to be like, oh my, really? He's from LA? You speak English? Wow. What are you doing there? Trying to get your attention. And I came up with this strategy all by myself one day. So when I got this random opportunity to do this film that was going to be sponsored and funded by the government of Vietnam to commemorate 1,000 years of Hanoi, which is their capital city, they wanted to make it an historical piece, a period piece, kind of like a Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon piece. But they wanted to bring in one fictional character that was going to be this general from Thailand or wherever that was back in the day, who one of the kings recruited as their military general. And they were looking for a non-blood Vietnamese character. So through the networking and whatever, it landed in front of me and I accepted it because I was like, this is the show that I'm going to go do. It was a movie at the time. And then due to the government situation in Vietnam, they turned it into a 300 episode series, literally. So I took that and I said, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be an actor on this. I'm going to be a lead and I'm going to make some noise in Southeast Asia. And to sum it up, in 2 years, not only did I do a Korean drama in Vietnam, simultaneously shooting this period piece all over the country from the north to the south. It worked because I'm not going to say his name, but somebody very big contacted me that was a producer, talent manager in LA. And he said, I have a project for you. Your headshot. That's when we used to give headshots. See, we don't even give headshots out anymore. It's so crazy. Like, he's like, your headshot landed on my desk and I watched your reel and I think you're the next thing. So I would like to help you out, and I want to know when you're coming back. Ironically, it was a month before I wrapped. So I came back to LA and then booked my first feature film in Hollywood. So my strategy worked. And that's kind of that's the short version of how I transitioned from stunts to acting and got my first gig, literally.
Wow, that is crazy.
Yeah,
I have a question. Was there a reason why they were looking for a non-Vietnamese blood actor to fill the role?
yes, because as what was communicated to me at the time was that everyone else obviously was Vietnamese by blood and they wanted to cast in Vietnam. However, there was this one story, and I can't remember the gentleman's name, but the writer of this project was the top historical writer in the whole country. And there was one story that he wanted to focus on about how this one king conquered all these different territories around Southeast Asia into China. And the reason why he was so successful was because he would see who his enemy was, and he would recruit or keep alive the best in all those fields to add to his so-called army. So there was a fictional character that it supposedly did happen, but that's why they wanted to bring someone else that was obviously Asian, but didn't look traditionally like he was Vietnamese by blood.
Yeah.
And at the time I had really long hair, like my hair was all the way down to my waist, and it just worked out. Like I looked the part. I was a foreigner. It just, everything lined up. Again, going back to your other question, I couldn't have predicted how that law meeting was going to go. And I asked them if I could leave and pursue this entertainment thing. And I've never forced things in my career. I've worked hard, but I've never, if someone said, and I don't mean if someone says no, I give up. What I mean is I had the meeting with the law firm. If they said no, then that would have been a different outcome. But I took it. They said, great, do it. I did it. I went to Southeast Asia. I took the role. It worked out. I didn't try and just kept going after this role because I was like, this is the role. That's kind of the mentality I've always kept throughout my whole career. Of course, I want opportunities, but if I don't believe in forcing things, but I don't believe in giving up. But I just you need to understand your environment and kind of the universe. And in my career so far, everything has happened for a reason. And so like I said, my hair was long naturally. I looked different. It just lined up. I can't even explain it. And that's why I ended up in Vietnam.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. It definitely, yes, it could be the universe, but I also think that, yes, although you didn't force things to happen, you were very open to opportunities, right?
Yes.
And I think that's what a lot of people can't even get to, right? Like they're scared of opportunities, so they don't really seek for them. But because there was this opportunity lined up for you, like, hey, like, let's go try it out. And I think that that's what makes the difference, that you are willing to take that first step. Like if it doesn't work out for the first time, then maybe it's not meant to be. And so I love the fact that you're mentioning like you don't really force it, because some people try over and over and over again. Maybe that's that career or maybe that path isn't meant for them. Maybe they're meant for something else, right? But they spend all this time focusing on this one thing that they want to pursue when they could have, done something else and been
I don't mean like
career,
I don't mean career change, right? I mean,
Yeah.
like, for example, if you're trying to write one project and you're not getting anywhere with it, then just transition, write a different, let it breathe is what I always say, right? So I'm not saying like give up, like, oh, don't try to force it. Like you were just talking about roles for Asians. It was non-existent. So what was I going to do? Give up? No, I just kept at it, but there's certain situations where, like I said, I don't want to burn my tires out, but I still need to get to that destination, right? So I'm going to try an alternate vehicle, a different route, but and that's what I mean by not giving up, but at the same time, not forcing it, right? So it's a thin line, but like I said, that's kind of the mentality I've always used and applied in my career so far. And it got me back to LA, literally. Yeah. Which was crazy.
That's amazing. Yeah, it is very crazy. I love how strategic you were thinking about it too. And it actually worked. So talk about how you went back to LA. What was the first role that you had when you went back to LA? And to date, what is the role that you were most proud about today?
Okay, so those are two different projects. Obviously, the first one I was in, and I always said this, like my life dream was to be in a Hollywood feature film. I was able to check that box right away, which was insane. Cause now I'm like, now what do I do? Right. So I keep going. But when I came back to LA, and it was crazy because in Vietnam at the time, because it's communist, there's only so many channels on television. And one of their channels was always dedicated to Korean pop. And I didn't realize how huge of a fan base Southeast Asia was even back then of Korean entertainment. And so I'd already been a fan of K-pop because when I went to Yale, the majority of Asian students at Yale were Korean. And because of my mix, they just assumed I was Korean too. So I mean, we're talking like Yusinjun, we're talking SES, we're talking One Time, we're talking like Turbo, we're talking all these like Junushin, we're talking all these OG groups that I had no idea. And all of a sudden in a week, I was like listening to all of them. And then I was watching K-dramas and really finding an identification because I kind of looked like Korean actors. Like I identified with them physically. So I'd already kind of gotten on the bandwagon back then. And this is, late 90s, right? And so when I went to Vietnam, which was a lot later after that, and I saw these same artists that had like progressed in their career, and I saw these dramas with, I was like, oh, I remember that guy from that other drama. I was very in the loop with the Korean entertainment being in Southeast Asia. So I say all this because ironically, when I got back to LA, there was a dance film from the original writer director from Save the Last Dance with Julia Stiles, and then The First Step Up with Channing Tatum. He was now doing, and of course there was a bunch of other step ups, but he was responsible for the first one with Channing Tatum. And now he was going to do his third dance story with Derek Huff from Dancing with the Stars and K-pop singer Boa at the time. And I had known about this project because she teased it when I was in Vietnam. And I was like, oh my God, Boa, because at that time, I believe Rain had just done I forget. It was that transition period where a lot of these K-pop stars were starting to take big roles in Hollywood production. So I was like, oh my gosh, Boa is going to do her thing now. And I was a huge fan of Boa from back in the day.
Same. And
like,
Rain.
yeah,
oh, loved Rain.
Like I still am. And so when I got to LA and I got this script, I was like, oh my God, this is the script. Like this is the film. And like I said, it worked out. I was able to co-star along with Boa and William Lee, who is my industry older brother. I watched him growing up, and then to be on my first feature film with him as my literally like an older brother in the business, it was just such a crazy experience. And then Boa's here with her team from SM Town, and I was like, and CJ Entertainment was doing it with. It was just like, what is going on? This is insane. So that was my first gig, my first feature film. And it was not only memorable, but meeting Boa and her team, both SM Town and all the people that worked for CJ, then that created a bridge at the time that I would later cross to work in Korea, but had no idea I was forming that in the moment then, right? So I'm extremely thankful and the movie was called Make Your Move. So I'm extremely thankful for that whole experience because it led to so many things later in my career. The second question you asked was my most memorable role, I believe. And that hands down is Bolo in Warrior and HBO Max's Warrior, because that was a full circle project for me. I started martial arts at the age of 4 because of Bruce Lee. I grew up obviously continuing to be a fan of him, but more importantly, applying his philosophy to just my life. I would read his quotes. I would read his books. I would study his tape. I self-taught myself nunchucks based on his performances. I self-taught myself a lot of martial art weapons, just rewinding beta tapes and VHS tapes back in the day as a kid. So to me, he was not only an iconic figure on camera, but also, like I said, I carry a lot of his philosophies to the present day. So while I'm growing up, football, basketball, taekwondo, everything, going to Yale, going to grad school, stunts, transitioning to acting, he had written this treatment on Warrior before obviously he passed in the early 70s. And it had sat in Shannon Lee's in his daughter's garage for all these generations, for all these decades, right? While I'm growing up, it's in the garage. As I'm getting older and starting to get into the business, Justin Lin calls Shannon Lee and is like, hey, what's up with that treatment that your dad did? I heard there's a rumor, there's a script. And she's like, I have it. They pitch it. Cinemax, which is under the HBO umbrella at the time, decides to pick it up. I'm watching a show called Banshee in real time on Cinemax with the showrunner Jonathan Tropper, starring Hoon Lee. I'm like, this is an insane show. I love this. Like, who wrote this? Who's showrunning? This is insane material. They all get together, Jonathan Tropper, Justin Lin, and Shannon Lee at HBO, and say, we're gonna make Warrior. Now let's cast it. And I originally went out for the lead, Assam, and then they called me back and they're like, actually, can you read for Bolo? And that to me was like, I literally remember it. I started laughing when my agent called me because I was like, they want me to read for Bolo? Because as a kid growing up on all these traditional teams like football and basketball and baseball in these mostly African-American Latin environments that I was playing in, I was always not only the only Asian, but physically I was big. So naturally, everyone used to make fun of me and call me Bolo or Chung Lee from Bloodsport when Bolo Young played and acted with Jean-Claude Van Damme. And so now, full circle, I'm young into my acting career, and they're like, we think he's perfect for Bolo. And I was like, oh my God, like I'm gonna book this, and this is gonna be crazy. And I did. We booked it. We shot it in South Africa in Cape Town. I mean, that's a whole nother story where, obviously everyone knows Nelson Mandela and his whole fight to end apartheid and civil rights. And to know that Warrior never got made in the 70s because of the similar discrimination Bruce encountered in Hollywood, and even going back to like the first Kung Fu where, David Carradine played a full Asian character even, there's all these things. And then now we're shooting in 2017 in Cape Town, South Africa, like the motherland, literally. So you put all this in the pot and we haven't even gotten to set yet. You know what I mean? Like I haven't even done anything yet. It was already just crazy. It was already so memorable. It was already such an honor. It's still kind of unbelievable, to be honest. I say this all the time, but it's facts. The fact that I have a great relationship with Shannon Lee, the blood daughter of Bruce Lee, the fact that I was one of his leads in his treatment that he wrote before he passed and was able to contribute to his legacy. People always like, Rich, you're prolonging his legacy. I'm like, no, I can't even say that. I just need to continue his work. He's a legend. Like no one can help him. Like no one can help Bruce Lee's legacy, right? So when I think of all that, it gets really overwhelming. And that's why not only was I a fan of Bolo Young and Bruce Lee, but to play Bolo in a Bruce Lee written project under the HBO Max umbrella, it's a lot to absorb and to take in. And to this day, I'm still like someone needs to pinch me sometimes because it's that big to me because of all the personal connections.
Yeah, it's amazing how everything really aligned, right? And because it also took place in San Francisco in the late 1880s.
Exactly.
And you grew up partially between LA and San Francisco, went to school in San Francisco. It must have been so symbolic for you and meaningful for you to take on this opportunity. When you signed up for the role of Assam, did they not have that same sign-up process for Bolo, or how did that happen?
I think other actors will understand this, but for those of us that aren't in the industry, or those of you that aren't in the industry, I think that's kind of a casting situation where they bring in everyone that they think could play the main role. And then off of that, they see your auditions, they interact with you, they see your tapes, and then they kind of are able to have like a sit down with the entire crew and go, you know what? He would be great for this and that and that. So it doesn't happen a lot that way, but it has happened in other roles that I've booked where I've gone in for one character and they go, he would be great for this character. The same thing happened for this recent show, on Netflix I did called Partner Track. It's me and Desmond Chiam who play brothers. And I actually read for Desmond's role that he eventually booked first. And I didn't know the behind the scenes. And so when they called me back, it was kind of like a Assam Bolo situation where they called me in for that role. And then like, he'd be great for the older brother, and I didn't even know that older brother existed yet. Just like I didn't know Bolo existed in the script yet, because obviously they don't share that information with you. So it happens more than you think, but I think it's just one of those internal casting procedures things that
Yeah.
I have
Mhm.
nothing to do with. So
Yeah, no, yeah, very interesting. Thank you so much for breaking that down because yeah, I don't know anything about the casting procedure. So it's just interesting going into that and
yeah,
you
sometimes it's
explaining it.
very clear. Like sometimes they're like,
Mm,
we want him and then boom, boom, boom. And then
got
sometimes,
it.
it's fair to say that even the creatives don't know. So
Yeah.
they want to see what's out there, what their options are, So I think it's great in that respect because it exposes everyone
Yeah.
to the creatives.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, thank you so much for sharing that. That was so I when you told me that story, I literally got chills. You after you got connected with Shannon and
Yeah.
it must have been such a monumental milestone and moment in your life. And I think it all just connected and aligned so well. And the fact that, you brought up, you growing up and people were calling you Bolo, it's just it all
Yeah,
just aligned. It all
I
connected
can't
so
make this
well.
up. You know what I mean? It's a movie in itself, to be honest. And it's still weird to me in the most positive way. I always try not to think too much about it. I'm just like I said, to be in Bruce Lee's world. I always said if I could just have worked on Warrior one day, that would have been epic. Let alone a whole season, and I'm playing this iconic character. Like it was just like, whoa, this is insane.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we'd love to know from your perspective, Rich, how do you see the future of Asian and Asian American representation on screen? Um, After, so many years being in the entertainment industry, I'm sure you've seen a lot of things change. We'd love to know your outlook on what the future looks like for the Asian American community.
Well, first, I think there's been so many people that have come before me that have really carved this path for us, like myself and other younger generations to follow. A perfect example is Michelle Yeoh. I mean, she is getting recognized now for things she should have been recognized decades ago. And the ignorance and I think the lack of accessibility for the general population to see what us Asian American actors, Asian actors have the capabilities to do and what we've already done. I've always said we've been here already, you just haven't shifted the light onto us. And so on one end, I celebrate Michelle because she is an iconic mogul in our industry. But also, it also makes me frustrated because people are now recognizing her and she's older and she's been doing this forever. So I'll take the silver lining, which is people are seeing her and it's shining more light on the AAPI community within the industry. But like what I initially said was, I have to give credit where credit's deserved. And there's people that have come before me, people like William Lee, people like Russell Wong, people that I watched growing up. And so to be in the position where I am now, which I always say I'm still very young and green in the business, there's so much more I want to do. There's so much more I have to do. But currently in 2023, this is the time. People used to tell me in 07 and 08, oh, Rich, you're coming in at a good time. And I'd be like, okay, I trust you, but I don't really see it. I don't feel it. Like, if anything, there's nothing really positive going on for us. But now, I mean, I remember the year Warrior debuted. It was the same year Crazy Rich Asians came out. And I remember we were both at this one function together. And I was just like, this is insane. Like the Crazy Rich Asians, this epic feature film. Now Warrior, this Bruce Lee inspired TV show. We're making moves, and from there, we've seen other shows and other spin-offs and whatnot that focus more on the Asian stories. I recently just did a pilot for Disney this past summer about Vietnamese Asian baby girls in OC in Orange County. And it's not Chinese, Japanese, Korean. It's like we're shedding light on these micro communities and we're peeling the layers back because, a lot of us Asian Americans that grew up in certain areas, we all know we existed. We all know there's not one type as Hollywood has traditionally portrayed us in. There's so many variations and subdivisions of Asians in America, literally. So the fact that we are now at a point where, for example, Partner Track on Netflix, where you have a Korean American lead, Arden Cho, but then the story navigates to a Chinese family where me, Desmond, and Kelvin Han Yi, who plays our dad, is kind of the B storyline about this merger going together. Like, just the fact that you have a Korean and then there's light within the script about a Korean and a Chinese situation. A lot of people may not understand that, but we do. Okay. And also the fact that the kids that Desmond and I play are not immigrant kids. We've been here for a minute, just like we have, or just like I have specifically. And then we focus on another project I just did, Asian Baby Girl, where it focuses on 3 Vietnamese gangster girls from the OC coming up. I mean, I think that speaks volumes right now. And then you have Everything Everywhere with Michelle and Key, the same time hitting. Like, there's so many things on the highest level, let alone there's so many indie projects and short films and all these other things that are happening because of these big things that have inspired the younger generation to do, and to show them that there is opportunity. You don't have to be fearless. You can be an actor of Asian descent in Hollywood. The guest stars, the recurrings, like all the stories that are on television now, they're incorporating Asians all the time. You go on Deadline any day, there's going to be something about Asians on Deadline, and even what you guys do on your platform. Like, there's so much content now, it's crazy. But then again, there's always been, thank God to social media and all these platforms, we can now just expose what we do. So I think it's a fabulous time for young creatives, young actors, anyone inspiring to study the craft, to even pursue the craft. Like, now's the time. And you're hearing it from me, someone who was told the same thing decades ago, right? Like, I'm saying now's the time. It's a really special moment for us, and we need to take full advantage of it.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I think you bring up a good point about how, we're seeing more films incorporate different ethnicities into those roles. Like you mentioned, Partner Track, we have Arden, Korean, and then, you bring in the Chinese families, Chinese characters. And I do like the representation, right? And in Asian Baby Girl, they're representing the Vietnamese girls and Vietnamese community. And it's different from how we were seeing it back then, when like they just needed an Asian character and they would bring in any Asian character. As long as they looked Asian, then they would fill the role, right? Yep. And I love that they're bringing more representation for those different ethnicities. And I do think that it's interesting how, Michelle Yeoh, for example, she's been here for a long, long time. She's been in the industry for a long time, but no one's really said her name until recently.
Literally recently.
Yeah. Literally recently, until Everything Everywhere All at Once. And for those who were before us, those who were in the entertainment industry before us, I feel like they put in so much work to lay the foundation for us, right? And we don't hear about their names until, for example, Michelle Yeoh, she comes out with a whole hit movie. And I feel like we have to give them justice for the work that they've done, right? And
definitely,
the thing that we can do right now is just to continue saying their names, right? Continue honoring the work that they've done in the past for us, whether they're still in the industry or they're not in the industry. We have to recognize that they are a really big reason why we are here today, that they continue to push through and not give up, so that they could allow us to have these opportunities today. And I think the best thing that we can do is just to continue saying their names, continue to honor them, continue to recognize them, and make sure that, people knew what they did back then, what they did for our community back then, so that we are able to do the things that we can do today and to pursue these opportunities.
Agreed. We have no excuse.
Yeah.
For generation.
Yeah. This is the perfect time. So we are nearing the end of the podcast, Rich. I do want to talk about one thing. Recently you served as the Grand Marshal leading the San Francisco's Chinese New Year Festival and Parade on February 4th. What was that like? What did you expect going into it, and how did it turn out? I want to hear about it.
Yes. Speaking to me now after it's happened is a different conversation than what we might have had prior to February 4th. Prior to February 4th, I was very honored and humbled to have this opportunity to be elected by the parade committee in the city of San Francisco, along with Alaska Airlines and all the sponsors, to be the Grand Marshal of a city that I've spent majority of my life in, having watched the parade, having gone to school close to Chinatown, it was another full circle moment for me. Along with Warrior, having been written in San Francisco with that backdrop, it was really cool to be asked to do that. Now you're talking to me post parade, post festival. It was so much bigger and so much grander than I had anticipated. It was raining a little bit on Saturday, on February 4th, but just a light drizzle. And still with those conditions, I mean, I'm weak now because I'm LA, like I'm adjusted to LA life. So 60 degrees is cold for me, where back in the day it wasn't. So not only is it cold up there and it's a little wet and dewy and whatnot, and it looks like it's on the verge to like thunderstorm. Already at the start, there was over 500,000 people in attendance. So I heard those numbers at the start, and I'm, of course, in my car under an umbrella, talking to Martin Yan, chef executive cook, who is the honorary. And I'm like, okay, 500,000, cool, And it wasn't until we started on Market Street, as we made our way to Union Square, where we kicked it off live at 6 p.m. with the fireworks and everything. But coming down Market Street, I was like, oh my God, there are so many people here. And I'm doing my wave and trying to look all calm. And inside, I'm like, there's a lot of people here. And then we get to Union Square and there's more people there, and they have all the lights and all the local stations are going live. And, I'm on camera and I have to light the fireworks, and then I got to get back in. And then actually my band from my high school, I went, like you said, Archbishop Burton High School, they put them behind my car. So we have the largest marching band in the city. And I'm so proud of that, even though I was never a member. I'm just so proud of it. And we had, the flag girls were out there, and then, our conductor, and then the whole band. And I remember just looking and seeing the grandstand, seeing Macy's, all the cameras, and then my high school band. And of course I had my family in the car with me. And I was like, yo, this is huge. Like, I feel stupid right now because I didn't realize it was going to be this grand. And that's just the start. The parade, literally from start to end in the car, took about an hour and a half. And the amount of support and people that came out was mind-blowing from my POV, because I've always been on the side, right? Like everyone else. But to be in the car where everyone's looking at you and waving and yelling and screaming bolo at random points of the parade, it was so cool. It was so surreal. And it really got me emotional because of all the support that, despite the weather, and despite, post-pandemic environments, and, because this was the first real parade that they've had since COVID. They had one last year, but it was still kind of restricted and people were very kind of like on the fence about going. It just felt so alive. And I felt so blessed to have been asked. And I literally, going through the parade, I was like, this is one of those once in a lifetime moments, literally. And that's what I said as soon as I finished. I said, that was a moment that will last a lifetime, because I had no idea how to, I couldn't have predicted the feeling, the vibe, the energy. And I'm even more grateful now to have been elected to do that. And I just can't thank the committee, the city of San Francisco, Alaska Airlines, and just everyone that came out for just showing up, because it was alive. It was crazy. It was so much fun.
Wow. 500,000. That is a lot. When you
At
think of that
least,
number,
at
it's like,
least.
I feel like that's just a number. When people say it to you, it's like, oh, okay, that's expected, right? Until you actually get there and see 500,000 heads, 500,000 human beings,
Oh
that is insane.
The committee kept apologizing to me after, like, I got done and I went to there's a VIP tent for us to watch the rest of the parade come by. And they're like, Rich, we're so sorry. If it didn't rain, we would have had a bigger turnout. And I was like, this is big enough. Like, to think that is usually doubled on like a dry Saturday night, let's say, in San Francisco is I can't fathom that. So again, just thankful to have had the opportunity. A little embarrassed to say I didn't know it was going to be that huge, but so happy that I was able to do it.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, as you know, I think I told you before, but I was born and raised in San Francisco. And I think growing up in San Francisco is a big part of the reason why I've always been so proud to be Asian, and the Asian American community in San Francisco is just so strong. And so tight-knit. And I love, the fact that the Asian community will come out and show up if community is out there, like if there's anything that they can do to help the elderly community, whatever it is, like any initiative people are putting out to help the Asian American community, we always come together in San Francisco, and that's what I love so much about it.
Definitely. I agree with you 100% on that.
Yeah. So Rich, I have one last question for you, and that is, what do you have in the pipeline now? What are you currently working on? And do you have any last remarks for our listeners today?
Sure. First thing, what am I working on? Well, it's something, as we always say, it's delayed, right? So something I did work on is coming out actually this month in February. I had the opportunity to work on Billy Crudup's new show on Apple TV Plus called Hello Tomorrow. And that, I believe, is going to be available on Apple TV's platform on the 23rd, I believe. I could be mistaken, but it is definitely this month. I can't say much, but I play a different character in the sense to where he's athletic, but you haven't seen me in this uniform, is what I've been saying to friends. And it was fun. I was able to shoot it simultaneously while shooting Partner Track, which obviously already came out. So it was just a really good experience, and obviously happy to be part of the Apple family. The other thing I have been working on, I've been more involved, is the video game world. And I finished one game last year, and I'm currently working on a big one right now that, due to the NDA and all that good stuff, I can't really comment on, but it's a sequel, I can say that, to a game that's already out that has a insanely big fan base. So I'm just really proud to be playing this character, to have been cast for this character. Ironically, they don't usually always cast based on physicalities, because usually, as the voice actor and as the motion capture person, you don't need to, they can change the way you look, obviously, right? This guy looks like me. It's really weird. Like it's very cool, because I always joke like, oh, they cast me because I look like the graphic, which is usually the opposite, right? It's usually some unassuming person who ends up being the superhero, right? In the game world. So excited for that. We're currently working on that right now in LA. What else? Also developing a passion project of mine with an up-and-coming writer-director that we will hopefully bring to San Francisco. It takes place, it's written based on being in the city, and we are going to start principal photography for the short version in later this spring, but we've already been working on the show, which we would like to bring to the city next year. So again, no promises yet, but the momentum we've already created and buzz is great. There's been a lot of great feedback, and that's why we're able to do what we're doing already. Just the investors are ready, certain production studios are ready. So couldn't be more excited to have that in the near future. Also waiting to see if Asian Baby Girl will go to series. We should be hearing quite soon. So that would be very cool. Like I said, it would bring another Asian demographic community to the forefront. I think a story that definitely needs to be told. A story that obviously makes me feel old, because it's about high school teenage girls, and I'm one of the OG guys in it, but that's fun. And just some other things going on right now that would be a little bit premature to talk about. But like I said, the momentum has been going for me for a while. I couldn't be more thankful, grateful for this opportunity to just be working as an actor in Hollywood. Ironically, some of my projects are, on large platforms, but, when I'm at home training, going to class, working with my coaches, work is work. And so as long as I'm working and keeping my training going and the study of the craft alive, and, and again, being able to pay the bills, like, there's no complaints here. So like I said, a lot of things up and coming, but a little bit premature to discuss them, but just thankful to be in the position I'm in.
Well, we're very excited for your upcoming plans, and we can't wait to hear more about it once they're fully announced.
Yeah.
So where can our listeners find out more about you online, Rich?
I'm on all social media platforms at Rich Ting World.
Perfect. We'll leave all of that in the show notes. And it was amazing having you on the podcast today, Rich. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Thank you for having me.